Okay, so the question that I chose like to pose to everyone is to what extent are career choices like truly personal individual decisions, and then how much are they shaped by like gender, socialization, and societal expectations?
Okay, so for me, from like the lecture, I learned that this actually starts really early on. Like when kids are younger, he talked about how boys are pushed towards things like building and problem solving, whereas girls are pushed towards like caring roles, and I feel like that can affect like the careers they choose later on. And also, he was talking about his mom who is a nurse, and then how like nursing and teaching is something that like woman you still see today, like more nursing and teaching, and then men like you see a lot of engineering, construction, and that's just like built. That's the that's just what's been built for how people like follow for now.
I think it also has to do with where you grow up too, or like where you go to school. So if you grow up in say like a poor neighborhood or a poor community and you go to school, they're going to push you towards maybe sort of like a blue collar type of job that you don't have to go to get an education or further your education, I should say. But if you grow up in like a more wealthy like neighborhood or even go to a private school, they're going to push you towards like those higher earning careers like engineering or law or
Yes, for sure.
medicine, stuff like that. And then I also had a question to pose. I thought, like, how would it be different, the wage gap? How would that be different if that shift, so where women started getting closer to men, if that happened earlier, how much closer do you think it would be now?
I'm thinking back to like the chart he was showing, and I feel like if it were to have happened sooner, like it still would be the same because I mean the jobs that a lot of women choose are like I realized that their like salary, sorry, I couldn't think of the word, but their like salaries are even like less, and I was like, but like they're putting in the same amount of work, and like nursing too, like nursing, like you go to so much school and do so much for that, but then you're still making like less than like someone who put in the same amount of work. Okay, but that question, I don't know. I just think it would be pretty similar to how it is now because I think it's at like a steadier rate. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have much to like add to you, but I completely agree with you that I think it would kind of just like stay the same as what it is now, pretty much.
Yeah. So in like the first lecture video, he showed like that Harvard letter that that woman received without her transcript hadn't even been like taken into account, but they were already like doubting her on being a mother and like how she would be able to deal with this, and asked her how she could balance this job and being a mother. And that's already like, I mean, that was, I don't know how long ago that was, but that's already like they're like thinking like they can't balance this because they're so used to women just being there for their family, and that stood out to me, that the letter. So
I also wonder if that still happens today. Like, I know, I'm pretty sure that letter was significantly older than, we
yes.
might think, but I wonder if that's like similar stuff to that still happens. What do you guys think?
I don't think so necessarily because I think like today like there are a lot more like like I'm thinking about like engineering. Like I know a few people like going into engineering as women, and like STEM majors, and like women with like STEM and stuff. It's like that's grown so much today, and I don't think people doubt it. I think they think of it as like something like they're striving for and like excited. Like I don't know. I don't think like that's like a huge thing now, but that's my opinion.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll move on to like something that I found like just something that like I learned that I didn't know before. So that was kind of like the whole thing about I learned that the gender pay gap is not just really caused by like one factor, like discrimination, but instead it kind of just develops over time through multiple stages of life. So it begins like with early socialization, where boys and girls are encouraged from a young age to develop skills and interests that kind of match like boys would play with like cars or whatever, and then girls play with like Barbie dolls, like things like that, that are just pushed from a young age. So this leads men to like enter what we were talking about earlier, just like entering the different careers. And that's just very interesting to me how it's like from such a young age it's being pushed, because sometimes people think that like I feel like they get caught up in the whole career thing happening when we're older, women being pushed into certain things and men being pushed into certain things. But it's very interesting to me to learn that that actually happens like straight from birth. Like they're just pushing everyone into their different like things that they should do.
Yeah, I found that part very interesting too, because like I mentioned that at the beginning about like how it starts so early on. It's like crazy. You'd think it's like your decision, but this is being pushed onto you, so then you take on this opinion and these rules. So yes, I agree.
I also think that's kind of like I'm in classes with, or I'm in like the engineering classes, but I'm also in some, I guess you could say pre-med classes because I have to take chem and stuff like that. And like, I mean, there's no more, like, there's no gender that's like more, I don't know what the word is, but there's not more of one gender than the other gender. And I think that that's interesting because I'm sure even as much as 20, 30 years ago, that difference was way more significant than it is now.
No, definitely. I feel the same way about like all my classes because I'm like, you never like are just looking and you're like, there's so many more men than there are women, but definitely that's a crazy thing to have seen. So, okay, I can get started on the part two. So I interviewed my grandma, who is like 75 years old. And when she was younger, she said she wanted to be an airline stewardess, but you have to be 5'4". And she was 5'3.5". So that like was like stood out to me because I was like the physical expectation at that long ago, like limited her opportunity from becoming that because she was just that like a little too short. Um, so she ended up working as a data entry worker in computers, and she went to school to do that. She said it was a really good job and like it was good pay, but she it's from what she was saying, it seemed like her opportunities were like way more limited from what she could choose to do. But when she had kids, she mostly took care of them, and she had five children, and my dad being the youngest, which kept her away from work for like a long time. And she went back to work when my dad was in second grade. So like that's a long time having five kids and him being in second grade. And once she went back, it was only part time, so she could still be there for the family. And this connected to the left there because it talked about how women often take on more responsibilities for with children, which can affect their careers and income over time. And then at home, she did most of the cooking and cleaning. So there was definitely like a division in their roles. And it reminded me of the second shift idea that he talked about, where women do more unpaid work, even if they also do have a job. And I think her life really matched what we learned in lecture. And I'd say that this because her experience clearly showed gender roles, and hearing her story made me realize how much things have changed. Like I have way more freedom now in choosing what I want to do, but at the same time, I feel like the pattern does still exist today, but just in like less obvious ways. Okay, that's all I have for my grandma.
Okay, so my grandma wasn't able to call this week to talk about it, so I just interviewed my mom, but I still felt like she kind of really showed this well. Um, so when I asked her about her early childhood, she actually, when she was really young, wanted to be a race car driver, which is obviously a very male dominated field. So she said that she was just drawn to it because it was exciting. She's always loved cars, and like she just has a lot of knowledge about cars actually, how to fix them, like types, all that kind of stuff. So she fell in love with that at like a young age, and always like wanted to do that. But it really does like go against the traditional gender expectations at that time, since racing's always just typically seen as like a male dominated activity and field. Um, so even though she had that interest, it didn't end up becoming like a realistic pathway for her at that time. So I feel like that just reflects how social expectations can shape what careers people actually end up pursuing. In terms of occupation, my mom ultimately became a homemaker. So she takes care of, like, she does the laundry, she cooks and cleans and does all that for us. And my dad, he has it, like he works and makes the money on all that, which I feel like is very like a traditional and nowadays kind of like an outdated way of things like working, because I do know a lot of people who their parents like both work and both cook and clean, but that was kind of just like how my family like decided to do it. So like she also like that, I feel like that really just shows how there's all these like traditional things. She wanted to do something that was non-traditional and then ended up not being able to do that, not having the opportunities to do that, and ended up just going down a traditional pathway, which I feel like I said earlier, was that this is very interesting because I do think nowadays we've come a long way, and that's not always how things are. There are still some families like that work that way and things like that, and still people who believe in like traditional homes and all that kind of stuff. But I feel like nowadays with our generation, especially, like we more so have the opportunity to decide that for ourselves because we're exposed to more like non-traditional families who have both their mom and dad working, both their mom and dad doing work around the house and all that kind of stuff. So overall, my mom's experiences align closely with the analysis that we presented in lecture, and her life shows how gender roles and expectations influence anything from like childhood dreams to then the adult responsibilities we end up taking on.
All right, I'll go last. I interviewed my grandma, so my dad's dad, and when she was a kid, well, she told me she wanted to get a college education and she wanted to become a teacher. And so she did end up going to school, for teaching, got her teaching license, got her degree. But, my grandpa, who I think they met in college, he ended up getting a job at a place in Northeast Ohio and he needed help like running the book sort of like doing office work and stuff. So she ended up working with him on like the office work instead of um like becoming a teacher. So she never actually became a teacher, even though she had like the license and the degree for it, which I think now looking back on it, I don't think she seems as like a big deal. I think she's glad that it happened that way. But I'm sure at the time she was like, oh man, like she was very disappointed. And then as for who took care of the house, she did like a lot of the cooking and cleaning and like I guess like the traditional like they're older, like a lot older than us, so it's a lot more like common for what they did back then. And then my grandpa like took care of the outdoor stuff like mowing, mulching, lawn care, stuff like that. And then she said that they pretty much split, like taking care of my dad and my aunt, like 50-50, like really even, like that's what she told me. And then she did tell me that if she were to do it over again, she would try to go into the medical field, which I thought was interesting. But, um, so yeah, so she did the cooking, cleaning, he did the lawn care, stuff like that.